Hello. As I discussed in my previous video, the shaman believes that illness is the result of loss of power or some damage to the person's soul or spirit. And the more souls that are lost, the more powerless and weak one becomes. In many cultures, people believe that a severe soul loss results in death. So what is a soul loss really? For me, the soul is our essence, our very life force, and the source of our vitality. It is my center of being and thus my power. So when we lose soul, we are in fact losing vitality and power. That is because when we lose a part of our essence, we are no longer complete and whole. But how do we lose souls? We may lose souls in a variety of ways. One of the main causes of soul loss is trauma. We are all exposed to potentially traumatic experiences throughout our lives. These may include a relationship breakup or the death of a loved one, accidents, major illnesses, birth traumas, domestic violence, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, etc. But the trauma does not have to be so dramatic to result in soul loss. We can lose soul for something as little as a sudden fall, a startling situation, or a fearful walk in the dark. Even though in Western societies soul loss is not a recognized phenomenon, our language actually betrays the fact that we experience it. We often hear people say, "When my husband left me, a part of me went with him." Or "When my brother died, a part of me died with him." Or "What she did really broke my spirit." These are all indications that soul loss may have happened. When we lose a soul, a hole is created in our soul body, or what we also call the etheric body. However, providing that the soul loss is not extremely massive, we manage to survive and lead a reasonably good life. We may live with those holes or weaknesses for a while until something happens in our lives which requires us to draw on that missing energy. These are usually challenging times in our lives which demands us to be strong and whole in order to be able to cope with the situation. If the particular energy we need to draw on is missing in our soul body as a result of earlier soul loss, we then react with either physical or psychological illness. For those of you familiar with the psychological concept of dissociation, this will sound very familiar. And yes, I often like to explain soul loss in the same terms, as a dissociation that occurs with a part of ourselves that we reject in order to maintain our greater psychological integrity. But a loss that nonetheless makes us more vulnerable in later life, as we come across challenges that requires us to draw on the psychological resources we have disassociated from. However, my therapeutic experience has led me to believe that while verbal therapy can help people recognize aspects of themselves they may have rejected, soul retrieval is the most effective way to actually recuperate these parts and integrate them back into our lives. Before I go on to explain what soul retrieval is, or the shamanic process of retrieving lost souls, I want to talk briefly about how we can recognize causes of soul loss. The effects of soul loss are not always immediately apparent. Some of the possible immediate symptoms are feelings of disconnectedness from our surroundings, from people around us, our closest family, and most severely from ourselves. At times, people who have suffered soul loss may appear to be living in a dream world or experience numbness and disconnection from emotions. In psychological terms, state of dissociation or depression would be considered by shaman to be classic symptom of soul loss. However, soul loss may also have long-term effects. Sometimes people I work with claim that they are unable to remember anything about their childhood. This is usually an indication that soul loss has occurred. Strong feelings of low self-esteem or powerlessness, as well as destructive behavioral patterns such as various addictions, may also point to the possibility of soul loss. Having said all that, we are not robots. We are all different and react differently to experiences in our lives. Soul loss, then, would affect each of us in a different way. So at the end of the day, the question of whether or not soul loss is the cause of any particular presenting symptom is best answered by the spirits. So what can we shamanically do in case of soul loss? Very simply, we journey to the spirit world to search for a lost soul, retrieve it, and reintegrate it into a person's body. This is a journey that can only be performed by a shaman or shamanic practitioner. After traveling to the spirit world and retrieving the soul, the shaman blows it back into the person's body. Just as losing a soul is one of the gravest injuries to a person, so is the work of soul retrieval. One of the most important and challenging tasks for the shaman, who must receive extensive training to learn how to properly find souls, communicate with them, and reincorporate them into the person's body, and of course, how to help the person provide the soul with the support to remain integrated in the body in the period immediately after soul retrieval. But perhaps the best way to explain the effectiveness of soul retrieval is to give you an example. Yarin, an 8-year-old boy from Israel, was referred to me for persistent and severe symptoms. For about 8 months prior to our first meeting, he had been defecating and urinating uncontrollably and seeing insects in his food, which frequently stopped him from eating. After various failed attempts at psychological and medical intervention, Yarim was referred to me. A diagnostic journey I did indicated the need for a soul retrieval and power animal retrieval. I was also given instructions to do certain artwork with him. Following the diagnostic journey and the piece of artwork, I performed a power animal retrieval followed by a soul retrieval. All in all, I met Yarim 4 times. At the time, the war in Iraq had just started, and there was fear that the Iraqis would bomb Israel with chemical weapons. The country was in turmoil, and everyone was instructed to carry gas masks and be prepared for a possible attack. From the artwork, it became clear that Yarim was afraid of the possible harm to his parents and siblings in the case of an attack. The soul I brought back for him was that of a newly born baby. After I returned from the journey, his mother told me that Yarin was born with 2 front teeth, and shortly after his birth, the doctors extracted the teeth. Shortly following the soul retrieval, Yaghin stopped seeing insects in his food, and his other symptoms gradually disappeared as well. What we can conclude from this is that as a result of the tooth extraction, Yaghin felt extreme fear and suffered a soul loss. Then when the war brought up deep fear for him again, the relevant soul part or energy that he needed to draw on was missing. The soul having been returned to him, he was able to draw on that power and deal effectively with his present situation. Thank you.